This is the APA documentation review to help you prepare for the upcoming APA quiz. Make sure you check the calendar and see the due date for the quiz. So we've already covered quite a few specific rules that deal with APA, and I addressed some of the specific circumstances or situations that have come up for you as you've been writing your papers. So this is just meant to be a very brief review to supplement that in-class discussion we had. So here are the top 3 rules for in-text citations that I want you to keep in mind. So first of all, I want you to, when you're citing source material, and this goes for direct quotes, summaries, paraphrases, but here in my example I have a direct quote. Make sure that when you include a quote or a paraphrase or a summary, that it's clear where that paraphrase or summary is coming from. So you offer specific details such as the author's name of the source, the name or names of the source, and the title of the source. So be as specific as possible in citing your source material in your essays. So here, if you notice from my example, I am quoting from this textbook, They Say, I Say, and this is co-authored by Gerald Graff and Kathy Birkenstein. And in my in-text citation, if I were quoting from them, I would say something like this. So according to the source, They Say, I Say by Gerald Graff and Kathy Birkenstein, the advice offered to writers is to, quote, listen carefully to others, including those who disagree with us, and then engage with them thoughtfully and respectfully. So the way you cite everything, the format that you use, all depends on how you introduce your source. So from my sentence here, it's clear where I'm getting this quote from. So because I'm clear in the title of the source and the authors, and notice my formatting, I am italicizing the title of this textbook. That's very important for you to do in your own work. So it's clear to a reader where this is coming from and who wrote this. So anytime you mention an author's name, you put the date in the parenthetical citation, and then be clear where your citation starts, and you do that with quotation marks. So you have a quotation mark here, and you end the quotation mark there. And in my parenthetical citation, because I introduced my authors, I don't need to put their author's name in the parentheses. All I put is the page number where this quote is from. So rule number 2, format the parenthetical citation correctly. So here I'm working with the same quote, I just structured my sentence a bit differently. So let's say my sentence reads, according to the source, They Say, I Say, the advice for writers is to, quote, listen carefully to others, including those who disagree with us, and then engage with them thoughtfully and respectfully, end quote. Notice that I did not use the author's name in my sentence here, so I would need to include the author's last names in my parenthetical citation. So I have my parentheses. Notice that I didn't end my sentence here after the quote. Instead, my period comes after the parenthetical citation. For new writers, this is a recurring problem that most writers put the period over here, and that's incorrect. The period comes after the parenthetical citation. I am going to be evaluating you on this rule in the quiz, so make sure that you make note of that. And because this parenthetical citation is still part of the sentence, so that's why the period comes over here. So I have the author's last names, comma, the date that they published this, and then the page number. So anytime you have authors' names, the date should immediately follow. If you notice in my previous sentence, I had the authors' names in the sentence itself. So notice that I offered in parentheses the date. So I didn't put the date over here because I had my authors' names in my sentence, not in my parenthetical citation. Rule number 3, make sure you punctuate correctly. So I already reviewed this, but it's worth repeating. You have quotation marks when you are quoting directly from source material. If you're summarizing or paraphrasing, then you don't need quotation marks. Your parenthesis, so when you have one set of quotation marks, then you need to have an end set of quotation marks. So make sure you're careful with that. And then make sure in your parenthetical citation that you separate authors' names with a comma, and then you have a date, comma, and then the page number, the P, period, and then the number. If it's multiple pages, I would have 2 P's because that makes it plural. So I would have PP, period, and then maybe 14 through 15 because it would be multiple page numbers. Anytime you have a title of a textbook or a longer work, that's italicized. Anytime you have the title of a shorter work, like a journal article or an article in a magazine or newspaper, that gets formatted with quotation marks. Titles of websites are in italics. Titles of web pages are in quotation marks. So the way I keep that straight in my head is anything that is found within a larger work has quotation marks. The larger work is italicized. So that's how I keep that straight. Okay, so now we'll go to the top 3 rules for reference page or reference pages. So this is the last page of your essay. For essay number 2, you will have a reference page because you are required to have source material. So the first rule, the reference page is part of your essay, so treat it as such by formatting proper page numbers and giving it the right title. So here I took a snippet of or screenshot of the sample reference page that the OWL website has. So we've looked at this in class. So just briefly, remember your titles are centered and you don't italicize it, you don't underline it, you don't format it in a different font style or font size. You just insert the word reference if you have one entry, or if you have multiple entries, you have references, no colon, so no 2 dots here, no semicolon, no punctuation. The only difference between the title of this page and the rest of the page is that it's centered, right? And this one actually is bolded and it shouldn't be bolded. So I just noticed that right now. And here it says reference should appear bolded and centered at the top of the page. So I guess APA asks you to bold it. So I'm used to MLA, so I've been corrected. So if you bold it, then I guess you are not wrong. And this sample can be found at the OWL at Purdue site. And again, I urge you to use this site as a resource to help you organize your sources. And don't forget to include the page number on this page as well. It's the last page of your essay. And some of you asked me in your questions, like, if the last page of your essay has space for you to include a reference page, can you include it on that last page? No, your reference should be on a separate page. So that's why it takes a page number up here. Rule number 2, alphabetize your sources by the letter with which the entry starts. So we've gone over that in class. Just a couple of reminders. It doesn't matter if the entry has a author or not, so you're not looking at what piece of information goes first. You're looking at the letter with which that entry starts. If an entry starts with a number, then those go first. So let's say you have a source that doesn't have an author, so you're starting off with a title of the source, and the title happens to start off with a number. So you would place that entry first because numbers go first on your reference page. And rule number 3, and this is a rule for the new updated 7th edition of APA, URLs for web sources do not need the phrase retrieved from. So I've noticed that some of you, when you submitted reference pages, when you have this URL, you have the phrase retrieved from, and then you include the URL. That's not necessary for the 7th edition. So I am going to be looking for that on your quiz. So you just have the entry ends, and then you include the URL as a hyperlink here to end the entry. So keep that in mind. For the quiz, expect to get quoted material from sources and format the quotes as in-text citations, and then organize those sources on a reference page. And what I mean by that is that maybe I will give you an example like this. Like maybe I'll say you have a book titled such and such by so and so. This is a citation from the book. How should you organize it? And so you'll just give me an example of how to format that quote as an in-text citation, and then I'll give you the information that you need in order to format a reference page that includes that source. So you'll just have to use the tools that you have. Like I mentioned in class, this will be open book because I am encouraging you to use the OWL at Purdue site as a reference. And then I also uploaded the APA decoder sheet to Canvas, and that was the sheet that was shared by Professor Barnett for all English students, and so that can be helpful for you to use in addition to the OWL at Purdue site. So make sure you use those tools as references to help you prepare for this quiz, and also to help you format your reference page correctly for essay number 2. So please let me know if you have any questions.